therapeutic strategies. So, my first slide here shows a very basic fact in evolution. Now, during evolution, what has happened is that, let's say on the left, we see some bacteria, some bugs. So, the way our body responds to these bacteria, we know that it is bad, is in fact similar to the way our body responds to the item seen on the right. So if you are consuming a very unhealthy junk food, the response is same. Inflammatory cytokines inhibit insulin action. Now why is this so? This is so because in evolution, you can see in this slide, the origin of the adipose tissue, the liver mesenchymal cells, the immune system, all are same to the organ in a fruit fly, to the same organ. So there is a very strong correlation between these three organs, the adipose tissue, liver mesenchymal cells and immune system. So that is the reason why our body responds to macronutrients in a way similar to how it responds to bugs. So nutrients and inflammation. So we know that type 2 diabetes is an inflammatory disorder. Having said that, this brings us to a drug which can be used addressing inflammation in type 2 diabetes. Now this slide here shows the cinchona tree. This is a photograph from the British India. So you can read there the introduction of cinchona trees in British India way back in the 1860s. Now where does the name of this tree come from? Now we know that this tree was used to get chloroquine. But how did the name cinchona of this tree come to? So the history says that the story goes back to 1638. Now this is very interesting. Wife of Viceroy of Peru, her name was Countess Cinchona. She acquired malaria. She was living in the New World. So that time America was called as New World. Now rather than getting the approved therapy for malaria at that time, the approved therapy was bloodletting. So it was very painful. That is how they treated malaria. A herbist who used herbs recommended the Viceroy that don't do bloodletting for your wife. I will treat her with something else. And he treated her with the extracts of bark of this tree. And she improved. So that is how this tree was named the cinchona tree. And in fact, after the dramatic response, when the Viceroy returned to Spain, he brought these trees and planted them in Europe. We know at that time, church was the supreme authority in Europe. So the powder derived from these trees was called the Jesuits' powder. So that is the history of chloroquine. And let's come back to India. Now in India, we believe in reincarnations. We believe that God has visited India 9 times. So similarly, chloroquine and its analogs have had 9 lives. So if you look back at the history of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, the treatment in type 2 diabetes is the 9th life for this drug. So it has a long and very interesting journey. So finally, if you look at the approval status, first US FDA approval was in 1955. Then it got enrolled in the WHO essential list of medicines, mandating all countries to keep this drug. 2001, approval in rheumatoid arthritis. 2006, polymorphic light eruptions. 2008, lupus erythematosus. And 2014, diabetes mellitus. So our DCGI tells us we can use this in diabetes mellitus since the year 2014. Now we have 5 years of use. So this is the DCGI approval. How does this act in type 2 diabetes? Now one thought is that if you look at the insulin degradation pathway, this is the insulin degradation pathway, and hydroxychloroquine is believed to inhibit insulin degradation intracellularly. That is one way how this drug acts. So this is the cartoon showing how it inhibits insulin degradation intracellularly. So this is one interesting hypothesis of how this drug works. Hydroxychloroquine also is shown to increase insulin levels in preclinical. So there is evidence showing it improves insulin levels. Definitely it causes a reduction in inflammation. Number of preclinical and clinical studies have shown this. Studies looking at hsCRP and other markers of inflammation. It improves insulin sensitivity. So it acts at different mechanisms. Inhibits insulin degradation, improves insulin sensitivity, is an anti-inflammatory drug. And it also increases plasma adiponectin. We know that adiponectin is the good hormone. So it increases plasma adiponectin levels. Also evidence for beta cell preservation. So it also has effects on the pancreas. So here you see lowering of pancreatic levels of inflammatory markers, namely interleukin 1 beta, TNF alpha, and TGF beta 1. So all this is lowered. This slide shows the studies where it was looked histopathologically, published in the Journal of Molecular Histology. Now, before we use in clinical patients, we need to have a lot of clinical trials. So there is a long list of studies of hydroxychloroquine. These are a number of studies. Now, way back in 2007, this publication in JAMA showed that probability of developing diabetes mellitus in rheumatoid arthritis patients with hydroxychloroquine use is less. It showed that if you use it for more than 4 years, it is associated with 77% lower risk of developing diabetes. This was in the year 2007. This is another study which compared it to pioglitazone. And this was the Indian clinical trial which led to the approval of hydroxychloroquine in India. It was a double-blind, randomized comparator used was pioglitazone. This was the study design. 800 plus patients were initially taken in the trial, and that was the protocol followed. And you can see change from baseline in all parameters, including fasting blood sugar, postprandial blood sugars, and HbA1c was significant. So that led to the approval. Now last year, 2018, IPCA's ongoing phase 4 study presented part of its data. The study is still ongoing. So this was presented at the ACE 2018 and eventually published in Endocrine Practice, which showed that type 2 diabetes patients respond to hydroxychloroquine. Phase 4 study, this is the same study. So here also you see, if you divide patients with hsCRP below 3 and above 3, this drug works as a glucose lowering agent in both patients. But in those patients having higher hsCRP levels, the anti-inflammatory effects are much more robust. You can see a LDL, non-HDL cholesterol, triglycerides were reduced significantly in both groups. However, the percentage change in LDL cholesterol was significantly more in the group with a higher hsCRP level. And this is the slide showing the LDL reduction. So these are interesting findings for hydroxychloroquine. And what makes this particular study very important is that here you have compared hydroxychloroquine to today's blockbuster drug, that is canagliflozin. So this study was initially a poster at the ADA, which was then accepted as an oral presentation. Here it was compared with canagliflozin. And what were the findings? Efficacy and safety of hydroxychloroquine was found to be at par with canagliflozin in this particular study. Real-world effectiveness and tolerability of hydroxychloroquine was assessed, and this was an open-label, multi-center prospective study. There are a number of other studies also, other than canagliflozin. So it can be used as an add-on to basal insulin, metformin, sitagliptin. So a large number of our diabetic patients who are on these multiple therapies, who are uncontrolled, can be a candidate for using hydroxychloroquine. There are a number of observational studies now published from India, where it is compared to teneligliptin, vildagliptin, and number of other drugs. So this is a long list of publications. RSHDA in the year 2017 put a practice recommendation endorsing the use of hydroxychloroquine in our country. Now what we use in our country is decided by the DCGI. This is a cost-effective drug, and we have a very long experience of this drug being used in rheumatology. So we can be sure of the safety of this drug, provided we rule out the contraindications before we use this drug. It also has CV protection. Now, the Journal of American Heart Association published this article which showed 72% decrease in the risk of CVDs with hydroxychloroquine. And this particular study is a very, very promising study called the OXY trial. It is not a pharma-sponsored study. This study is taken care by the Helsinki University Hospital. Here they are looking at the potential role of hydroxychloroquine for the prevention of recurrent CV events in patients who have had MI. 2,500 plus patients, and looks to be a very promising study. The results are expected by December this year. So if the drug goes through this, it may get approval for prevention of recurrent CV events in MI patients in United States. This study is a very promising study and we look forward to this study. Now I have put a very rosy picture of hydroxychloroquine, but we should be pharmacovigilant. What are the alerts or the red flags where we should not be using this drug? That is also very important. Now, the rheumatologists are the people who are most confident using hydroxychloroquine because they have used it for more than half a century. The thing that worries us most is the ophthalmologic complications. Now, what makes this different from chloroquine is the hydroxyl group, which prevents its passage across various barriers. We are worried for retinal toxicity, but if we look at the real risk, it is less than 1% in 5 years, first 5 years of use, and less than 2% in next 10 years of use. So the real risk doesn't appear to be that high. However, we should be cautious. These are the various risk factors for toxic retinopathy. If our patient has any of these risk factors, we should be very careful and probably not use this drug. When we are using this drug, how frequently do we assess for the retinal toxicity? So the recommendation is that during the first year of its use and thereafter annually, we should look for retinal toxicity. The Royal College of Ophthalmology also recommends in similar line. It says over 5 years, we should have a baseline examination and a hospital eye department, ideally within 6 months, but definitely within 12 months of starting therapy, and a color retinal photograph. Patients should be referred for annual screening after first 5 years of therapy. So we should keep this in mind. Many of our patients follow us very religiously. You prescribe a drug, they continue with the prescription for years together. So it would be a healthy practice whenever we initiate this drug to tell our patients about screening for retinopathy eventually. If they don't come back to you, they should be aware that they should be screened for this potential complication. Another thing which worries is hyperpigmentation. Now here, this is a very important thing. Incidence is 7.3% after 6.1 years of use. So the hyperpigmentation should not bother us. We start using the drug. Our patients are very net savvy. So they'll come back after a few weeks and they notice that they have lost they say that this drug may cause this side effect. But we need to be aware that this side effect prevalence is incidence is 7.3% after 6 years of use. And this should not stop us from using this drug in candidates who will respond well. What are the contraindications? Obviously, pregnancy is a contraindication. Patients with known retinopathy, maculopathy, it's a contraindication. Patients with hypersensitivity to aminoquinolone group compounds is a contraindication. So these are the contraindications which should be aware of. Drug-drug interactions. Patients with cardiac comorbidities on drugs which are arrhythmogenic, we should be careful because this drug may prolong QT interval. So we should be careful about this fact. So the take-home message is hydroxychloroquine reduces HbA1c in the tune of 0.9% to 1.3%. For a drug to get approval as an anti-diabetic drug, it should reduce HbA1c by 0.4%. That is the criteria. This drug reduces HbA1c much more than 0.4%. Cardiovascular outcome trials are promising. OXY trial, we are all looking forward towards the results of the OXY trial, can be started in patients inadequately controlled on type 2 diabetes, on 2 or more drugs. in type 2 diabetes. Real risk of retinopathy is usually after 5 years and not before that. But ophthalmologic evaluation is very important. So, coming to the end of this talk, this looks to be a promising drug. We have been using this for several years now. This addresses a very core issue in evolution, that is inflammation, the way we respond to macronutrients. The name comes from the wife of Viceroy of Peru. It's a very interesting story. And the Time magazine had on its cover page the photograph of the secret killer, and it believes to be the killer to be inflammation. So inflammation kills in a different ways. It can be in the form of a heart attack, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, also type 2 diabetes. So thank you all, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.